Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Inside the Creator's Mind. I'm Taylor, the creator of Legion's Realms at War TCG, and we're on to episode 6. And what do we have in store for episode 6? Well, it's a question that's pretty simple, I think. Does the learning ever stop? And the reason why I think it's a simple question is because it has a simple answer. And no, the learning doesn't stop. I think if you look at it as that, you made it, you produced a game, you've designed up cards, you built a set, you've launched it, people are buying it, you think, all right, just got to maintain this. But no, there's so much more than that. And I think that this concept of just assuming that the game is going to run itself, or the concept of going through and just going through the motions and I'm just going to produce the next card, the next set, and it's just that's how it's going to advance. But it's not the case. I think the one of the big things that are overlooked is just how much you have to learn and how much you have to keep learning. I think more things that we dive into in this series is just how much does get learned, how much does the general populace and how much does the game player and the community member really don't know what goes on behind the scenes. And I think we're going to try and open up everyone's mind here a little more as this series continues to go on. So let's dive into this a little bit here. Does learning ever stop? Well, there's a lot of things to keep learning. I think from trying to make sure that you continually improve quality in your cards, quality in the varnishes on those cards, quality in the foils, learning the processes more. I think learning the manufacturing process as a designer and as a developer is so critical. I think that when instead of just keeping a step back and saying to the manufacturer, that's your job and creating the game is my job, I think it's more of a teamwork thing, and it's more of the more I learn about how you manufacture the game and manufacture the cards that I want you to produce, the more you get to learn not just the process of how to do it, but how to make it more efficient, how to make the process move along quicker, the labor behind it, the process in the creation of the cards, maybe how the saturation works, the color hues, how they go about layering those colors. That's crucial because that's great feedback for me as a designer. Because when I'm working with my artists, I can be like, you know what, maybe this color palette isn't necessarily the best for what we want, or this is not going to produce the best quality when it goes to print. Obviously there's different colors that pop when you look at foils, right? So you get those teals, those bright greens, those bright electric blues, and those like really powerful royal violets. I think those come across beautifully in rainbow foiling. So it's just some of those things that you wouldn't have learned if you didn't ask questions, if you didn't really follow up with the manufacturer and go through that learning process. I think when that's on the manufacturing side, how long it takes for lead times of sets, what all goes into creating the packaging. Because if you have a facility that's manufacturing the boxes and the cards but not the booster packs, or maybe you have ones that are manufacturing the foil and then the foil gets sent to your printer afterwards, and there's a lot of like different nuances and different things going on. So asking questions is key. Just like learning things in life, asking for advice, asking questions, continually trying to advance your knowledge, because knowledge is power, and the more you know, the more educated you are as the consumer, the more educated you are in your decision making. So I think that is huge, learning from the manufacturer. And then of course what we've talked about in some of the other videos in this series is learning for the industry. The industry is constantly evolving. The gaming world is quite large and ever changing and ever shifting. So specifically in the TCG aspect, there's lots to learn. There's lots to follow along with. I'm constantly trying to keep the pulse on when the next set releases are for other games, and what their set structure looks like. How many cards in each pack? How many packs in each box? What are the price points on stuff? Like learning your market, asking questions, digging into what is the consumer willing to buy, what are they looking for, what are they willing to spend, how much are they willing to spend, how much disposable income they have at the target demographic that you're trying to target your product towards. I think that there's lots of questions to be asked there, and there's a lot of great feedback that the community can give you, not just market research from what you observe and what you learn and what you read, but community feedback. Well, what's the one benefit I think that the indie TCG space specifically has, is that they have direct link to their community. There's not a big corporate hierarchy. There's not a big chain of command. The stuff doesn't get lost in translation. It's basically forming a business partnership, almost like a friendship. You get to talk one-on-one with your community. You get to learn from them. What are they looking for? What would they like to see in the next product? Do they have any quality concern issues? Was there not enough packs in a box, or not enough cards in a pack, or maybe is there something else that you can change with foil procedures? Did they like the variants you produced? Did they like the sketch cards? Did they like the different foiling textures you used? Did they like the extended arts? What did they not like about it? There's a lot to be said there. As we develop and grow as an indie TCG, given the fact that we're still very quite in our infancy of the first year and a half of our game, we've learned a lot. I was able to work with the manufacturer and learn everything it took into creating algorithms for sets to make sure that proper card randomization, proper collation, there wasn't clumping involved in some of the cards. It really helped us learn where we upgraded our booster packs in quality assurance from our Ravaged Lands first release to Bountiful Harvest, and then we were able to take that with what we learned and move forward and transcend it into Frontiers and going forward. And that's just learning about the packaging and the manufacturing process, but then also learning customer feedback, community feedback on how Bountiful Harvest may have been too small of a set. Alright, so we're going to look at how we're going to increase the set size while still keeping it financially viable. And these are the things, these are the questions, these are the things that you have to keep learning, and then even more on the business side, not necessarily the TCG itself, but learning the import and export procedures, given the fact that we're a Canadian company. So what we have to know is like, how do we go about brokering this across the border? How do we get stuff into the United States? How do we ship product overseas? We have a game store that plays Legions in Hong Kong, so how do we get product over there? And what are the procedures in international overseas shipping? And then dealing with game stores in Europe, and dealing with their value-added tax or VAT tax on imported goods, specifically from North America. So learning the nuances of that, of what the customs charges can be, and the fees, and the shipping process, and the import taxes. And these are all things that, going into it as a game developer, they're not even on your mind. They're not even something that you're thinking of, or even would even think to come across. But it's all stuff you have to learn trial by fire in your first year of developing, in your first year of shipping and producing, because there's so many other nuances. If I were to look back a year and a half, rewind before we launched, I'm a different person than I was then. Just the sheer amount of knowledge that you obtain, and it just doesn't stop. There's a constant flow of information coming in, and you got to be able to absorb it like a sponge. You got to be able to understand it, not just absorb it, recognize it, understand it, and almost like regurgitate it out, and be able to live and breathe it. It is, like I said in other parts of these videos, you gotta love it because it doesn't love you back. I mean, it's a grind, like many other entrepreneurships in your life, or in other people's lives, trying to start up their own business. It's a hustle. It's the passion, right? We talked about that before as well. So there's a constant learning curve, just trying to continually improve. I think that I'm a very strong believer in necessity. Necessity breeds innovation, but also I think that competition breeds innovation. So I think when you really look at what the big guys are doing, what is Magic producing, what is Pokemon producing, what is Yu-Gi-Oh producing, what is Flesh and Blood producing, and like how do they go about releasing their products, how do they market them, how do they build that product design. There's a lot of aspects that we would love to include into Legions. Particularly, like, I would love to bring in draft and seal that limited experience into Legion's Realms at War. Now it's a lot harder given our game design of having 8 colors and 8 active legions. So how do we go about doing that? This is something we're asking the community, how we break it down. Is it something that we go to Flesh and Blood style, where we produce a set that only features 4 of the 8 legions, and then produce a sister set down the road that does the other 4? But then there's pros and cons to that. There's discussion of, okay, well, if 4 legions get support in this set, and then it's going to take X amount of months to produce another set with 4 additional legions, is there going to be a metagame disparity? Is there's going to be obviously more cards for 4 legions than there are for another? So then, okay, so we can't really do that because that creates an impact on the constructed format that you don't want to sacrifice by just trying to add a limited experience. So then, these other questions we ask, well, how do we go about trying to create a limited experience? So we have a lot of our community members that are trying different things. They're working with us. We've actually added in a multiplayer set of rules. We're working on a free-for-all dynamic. How do we go about making cards in the future that work really well in a free-for-all mechanic? Or how do we go about in a two-headed giant style of teams, right? So there's a lot of questions to be asked there. A continual learning process. Then if we're going back to that draft and sealed format, well, how do we go about that with 8 legions? So it's stuff that we're trying to break down, trying to really break it into the pieces, and that they're digestible and that we can sort it out. If you look at it real on a big scale, it's quite overwhelming. So we try and tackle it one job at a time, one set at a time, and sometimes even card by card. So there's a lot of moving pieces, as you would expect. And I think that it just comes back to this overall question again. Does the learning ever stop? And quite simply, no, it doesn't. We're constantly trying to learn how to market better. We're constantly trying to learn how to reach. I think reach is the biggest thing in TCGs, specifically the Indie TCG, is how do you reach the interested consumer? How do you decide who's the interested consumer and who's the one that, and how do you differentiate between the regular game consumer and then the people who are interested? And what goes into making them interested? What are they looking for? And when you don't have always direct communication, sometimes you have to try and do it from afar. You have to learn from the successes and failures of those around you. Whether that be the bigger games or smaller indie TCG space, we're quite simply a small fish in a very big pond. So we're trying to work our way to become a big fish in a small pond, but that takes time, that takes effort, that takes a continual learning and continual building. So I know that was a lot. I kind of rhymed off a lot there. But once again, much like all of our other episodes in this series, there is so much to dive into, and we always end up just scratching the surface. But these are great topics to be had and to be discussed. And I think overall, from the feedback that I've been getting from the community listening, is that this is really beneficial. I think opening up some of this information, and acknowledging the community with that, and teaching them these kind of things. They only can understand us better. And like I said, an educated consumer can make educated decisions. And I think the more that we open up the transparency, the more we talk with the community about these kind of things and the processes a little bit behind it, and how we're learning things and how we're growing and adapting with that community, I think that a trust factor is built there. And when the consumer, or when our community members trust us more, is when we have that open line of communication. And when they do trust us, they're more likely to back us, they're more likely to support us, and then it only promotes growth. And at that point, a rising tide raises all ships. So we are always open to feedback. We're continually learning, just like we are in the gaming industry. We're continually learning in life. So otherwise, I don't want to ramble on any longer. We're already at a longer episode this time around, but it's always great to have you listening, and we'll be back for another episode of this series coming tomorrow. So thanks again, everybody, and this was the next episode of Inside the Creator's Mind. See you on the next one.